Well, hi, everybody. I hope that you had a beautiful weekend. Mother's Day, of course, we celebrated and honored our moms, and it really was beautiful. I always take into account that my mom's 76 years old, so I try to honor her the best way that I can. And this Sunday was so nice. I got to spend with my daughter and my mom, but it was sad too because I didn't get to spend it with my other daughters that I love dearly, and I miss both of those daughters that don't live in this state. But today we are going to continue our study on the seven seals. And it's a really strange thing, but today the headline in the news was that the Iran war has caused inflation to skyrocket to 3.8%, the highest level in nearly 3 years. And coincidentally, today we are going to be discussing the third seal, the black horse, which kind of plays into that. But I just want to start out by saying that there are many things that we do not know or understand about Revelation and the last days, right? Especially these seals and the trumpets. I think Revelation's judgments, though, are chronological because they're described as occurring consecutively. So, but that being said, I also want to point out that we don't know the pace at which these seals open or these trumpets occur, right? Does this occur a month apart, a year apart, or, how does this work exactly? And do they continue throughout the entire tribulation? Will other seals and trumpet judgments kind of compile on that? And these are questions that we cannot answer. We can't say for sure, but so kind of keep it in mind, when you go through looking at these things. We don't know the timing, and we don't know how long they last. So the duration, right? But just a little recap to bring us up to the point of this third seal. We went through the first seal, the opening of that first seal, and that's what starts the process of this kind of unrolling of the scroll. He confirms the Daniel 9:27 treaty. And what he's really doing is wearing a mask as a peacemaker. Okay, but in reality, he is really a warmonger, as Revelation 6:2 tells us that he goes forth conquering and to conquer. That's really his purpose, is to conquer and subjugate, right? So even the peace treaty that he confirms will be a form of conquest by making the state of Israel a vassal state. And really, that's what's happening right now. But after he confirms peace, his mask comes off. He becomes this conqueror who destroys and subjugates the entire world. And, many people don't see him for who he really is. They don't see him or what's behind that mask, because the true man is not really exposed yet. But the Bible tells us that he will be revealed when rebellion is no longer restrained in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2. And that's when we will clearly see this man for who he is. His mask will come off, and we will see that he is just like his father, Satan. He is full of hate and greed, envy, and his tools of warfare are lies, manipulation, gaslighting, and subjugation. He is truly a winner who wears a laurel wreath for recognition of his wins. His self-adoration and rebellion against God is what drives him. Just as Satan wanted to be like God and be worshiped, so does this man. He wants to be worshiped. So as an archer, though, he is a skilled master of deceit who stands at a distance contemplating his next move against his prey. His bow keeps his hands clean, and he never actually ends up engaging in any kind of hand-to-hand combat. Okay, but his bow gives him his power to subjugate the world, while his flying monkeys actually do the dirty work, his supporters, right? But after the appearance of this Antichrist, the second seal or red horse at some point will appear, right? It is the red horse of slaughter, right? When he removes peace from the earth. And in this spiritual context, peace is acting as a restrainer, a spiritual force against rebellion and hate. And when that peace is removed, the enemy's fruits, hate, anger, rebellion, and envy, will no longer be restrained. Their spiritual fruits will actually manifest themselves in the physical world as a tangible physical action. Violent, unaliving, and all sorts of horrible acts, just as the Antichrist will also be revealed by his actions, okay? Just as we are revealed by our fruit, they will be revealed by their fruit, and he will truly be seen. The Antichrist, the removal of peace, and the unrestrained rebellion mentioned in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2. This is going to create the perfect storm and unleash the true unmasked Antichrist and his followers, leading to global chaos and great bloodshed. Okay, the Antichrist wars alone, without even considering the other variables, they will create supply chain disruptions, volatility in global oil markets, and inflation. That's just a matter of fact, and we see that occurring right now. In Revelation 6:5, it says, when he opened the third seal, I heard the third living creature say, come. And I looked, and behold, a black horse, and its rider had a pair of scales in his hand. So the third living creature commands John to come and look. And he sees this black horse, and this is thought by many to symbolize death, mourning, affliction, and judgment. Okay, and I really think that that's an accurate description of this horse, because these events typically, they kind of all occur together, don't they? Just as the previous writers, they carried something, right? They had, the first one has the bow, the Antichrist has the bow. The second one had a sword. This one has a pair of scales in his hand. And the scales actually suggest something's going to be weighed, judged, or measured. All right, so, and consider for a minute though, really the cumulative impact of the two previous horses of death and war, okay, that lead to this black horse. It makes so much sense, right? The impact of conquest and rebellion and the lack of peace, they will lead to hunger, death, and mourning, along with inflation. So all of these kind of create this black horse, so to speak. So actually, in thinking about this is something I thought of, and I really know God showed me this. This is so interesting. This is one thing we don't think about when we see war and we see famine and these sorts of things that occur during this period up to this point, is the fact that mass displacement is a really common occurrence in these situations, and it's actually described in Matthew chapter 24, verses 15 through 28. Jesus tells the people to flee to the mountains when they see the abomination of desolation, right? So and also it is actually described as a sign of the end in Daniel 12:4. When Daniel is told to shut up the words and seal the book until the time of the end, he says, many will run to and fro, and knowledge will be increased. And this is happening right now. People don't realize this. I mean, yes, it's going to occur more so during this period, is what I think, but it's already begun. Okay, it's already begun. So, right now, mass displacement is at an all-time high due to wars and economic pressures, even in the US. And we're not seeing this for what this is, okay? But the truth is people are moving to and fro. They're moving from state to state because we have what's called an affordability crisis, right? Even if it's not because of war. So, and I can attest that because I moved to an area that lost a significant percentage of their population, all right, to the point that schools closed because they didn't have enough students. People are fleeing these states because they can't afford to live there. And, I ended up moving to an area where many of these displaced people from all over the country, they have moved to this area. They've relocated here. And it's created some serious issues. Okay. So when you have a situation like we're going to have during this period of time, and we have in the world right now, okay, it creates problems. It creates serious issues. It creates hostility and resentment. And I've seen that even where I live, where there have been threats made to people about moving here or against people that have moved here. And these are our fellow Americans, okay? And the truth is we live in a country that's supposed to be free, but these people, they don't want you here. They don't want you here, and they make it very clear. So what they've done is actually dehumanize people like me by creating derogatory labels that perpetuate these negative stereotypes, and they lead to this kind of social and employment inequalities is what it's led to. Many of them have said, well, we want to hire locals, or we know where I've seen threats like, we know where these people live, and there's going to come a day, and things like this that they've said. And so when people are displaced and they flee to these areas, because they don't have food, or they don't have, or there's wars, or whatever it is that's going on, the people that live in these communities that receive these displaced people, they're not usually very receptive, okay? But this area and many other areas that receive displaced people, I would guess that they will become very volatile situations, maybe, very contentious during this period. So, but that's on top of everything else, because the point I'm trying to make is that a lot of times when you have these judgments that occur and then they cause other things, those things that are caused, there are consequences, right? And there are reactions to a lot of these things. So there's a lot of things that could occur as a response to people moving to and fro, as Daniel describes. And, so that could create its own set of circumstances on top of, the issues with famine and pestilence and all the things that are going to happen. But not only are these events occurring right now, okay, that could lead to the exact situation that we've been looking at, but we've seen these sorts of things in the past, inflation and food shortages. If you look in 2 Kings chapter 6, the siege of Samaria was so bad that it led to normal sources of food being exhausted. So people actually began to eat unclean animals, and they began to resort to things like cannibalism, The king of Israel ended up blaming God for the predicament that they were in. And as a result of that, because he could not attack the Lord. He couldn't attack him, directly. He sought the Lord's prophet, Elijah. Okay. And you see this in situations over and over where when they blame God for something, they want to attack his people. All right. And it does show us that the people of God do become targets. It's happened throughout history. They become targets, and it will happen again, even according to Matthew 24, 9 through 13. He talks about it. So these people become angry at the Lord, and they attack those people that represent him. Okay, and it will happen. So be aware of that. Especially if you're in an area that's hostile, But anyway, when it talks about do not harm the oil and the wine, okay, this statement has been puzzling to so many people over the years. We can't really draw a decisive conclusion with this statement, but according to the information that we do have, olive oil and wine, they were not staples in the Roman Empire, but they were common in many people's diets, right? It's obvious that wine is not going to be a staple, but they're common. So the command not to damage them has two very common interpretations. Some believe the description means the luxuries of the rich will remain intact as they consumed more oil and wine than the poor. And then some say that the command recalls past famines in the empire when emperors ordered vineyards to be cut down so there would be more land to grow wheat, okay? So we don't really know. Does it mean those things? Does it not? I really don't know. But here's my thought about what this could mean, okay? This is just my opinion. The poor, okay, they're going to be devastated, especially devastated by this level of inflation. And they're always the ones that suffer the most, But I do think that the wealthy, they will suffer to some extent, right? They will experience some of it. But of course, this is going to be primarily a socioeconomic thing. So if you're poor, you're going to suffer more. And it could have, maybe that's the kind of reference that this is, that it will impact the poor more than the rich. But oil and wine, they're not necessities in anybody's pantry, okay? Although I use olive oil quite a bit, but I could get by without it if I had to, right? And I definitely don't drink wine. So they're not going to be affected though, in the same way as food is, especially for poor people. Rich people, they might use it a little bit, even if there was, really bad inflation, but poor people are definitely not going to splurge as much on those things. So people though, overall, they tend to prioritize food for survival, don't they? When things get really bad, what are we going to prioritize? We're going to prioritize food, not oil, not wine, okay? I could do away with my oil and be okay, but I can't do away with my chicken. I can't do away with my vegetables, right? These are important. They're more important. Food and survival is more important than oil and wine. That's my point. So the oil and wine, they might be just left on the shelves. Maybe nobody will buy them, right? So oil and wine aren't really going to be harmed at all. And they'll be widely available during this time because, there's no demand for them. That's kind of what I think, and, is a possibility. But the third seal is inflation, famine, and death. That most likely does reflect the state of our world during this time. His conquest, it is likely going to involve siege warfare to subjugate nations, right? And that's exactly a tactic that's currently being used by the U.S. against Cuba and Iran. It's really what we're doing. We are trying to subjugate Iran. So, and we used it in Venezuela too. And we ended up taking Venezuela through this. So imagine though, how easy it would be to control the entire world if a mighty military with great power controlled the world's choke points, like the Strait of Hormuz. And then you combine that by, other economic hardships that you could place on these other countries, like trade wars, controlling oil and natural gas. A king could subjugate the entire world through these methods, and it would lead to this exact scenario that we see with this seal. And it kind of looks like we're heading there now, doesn't it? But I actually made a video called Let's Make a Deal, His Game of Conquest, where I actually talked about this scenario. It was some time ago. It was, I don't know how many months ago, but it's kind of aged well, I think, if I recall. It does talk about all these things. And that's kind of, it looks like exactly where we're heading right now. So, anyway, that being said, I should probably end this before I ramble anymore. And I do hope, though, I'll be back on, Friday. And hopefully, y'all have a good rest of your week. And be safe and get ready for what's coming. Stock up and be prepared as the Lord would have us. Prepare for the worst, but, hope in God for the best, right? So anyways, I will see you Friday, and God bless you all, and have a safe couple of days. Bye.